was a lady called Geraldine who had been a long-term friend of Ted's and had known about the existence of his diaries for many years but had never seen them. And then obviously on our first encounter when I presented with them, I think it was immediately evident to me that Ted had reached a period in his life where he was keen to kind of explore that aspect of his life further. I think from that I just gradually and tentatively kind of probed the question of, you know, whether this material should be open to wider public consumption.
When I had what seemed to be endless time to begin with as a prisoner of war, I then thought, well, I can use this time and start doing some serious work. And I was very fortunate in as much that there's a chap in the camp, Adrian Heath. I saw his work and I thought, God, I'd love to draw like that. The life drawings, they were wonderful. And I was very lucky because he was very generous. He gave me a lot of time and encouragement, and that's what really started me off. It was a lifesaver really, because it gave me a point of focus and something to, well, ironical really, you can use a means of escape, but not the usual prisoner of war term, Kriegi, escaping, but escape from a bit like fishing really, where it takes you out of the world and you're in another world. I was trying to record both the atmosphere of the camp, the external views, although they were limited, looking from the camp, the occupants of the camp as well, and trying in a small measure to record the daily activities as well. The portraits generally record the people, the fellow prisoners. Looking back at them, I find a certain uniformity of the portraits, which I find a little disturbing now. They all seem to have a fixed position on the page, as it were. And how I captured that, I just don't know. It's almost as if I was probably one of these seaside people who do portraits on for people to sit down, look there, and I'll do a portrait. I feel a fraud, really, because my whole diary and looking at the work, it looks really as if it was a sort of Butlins holiday camp. You know, the gung-ho approach and that comes, that effect or vibes come away from it all. It was a rather happy experience. And only yesterday I picked up an account from a fellow prisoner, and he'd served 3.5 years. I never met him, but he must have been a wonderful guy because he's left a magnificent record. And he closes his account by saying that a lot of POWs couldn't settle down to normal life afterwards, and they regretted the fact that they'd left POW camps and would have liked it to have gone on, and a lot who couldn't settle just committed suicide or came to very unhappy ends. There were hardships. I mean, the march particularly wasn't very nice, and cattle trucks and all that, and certainly the lack of food. I mean, that was pretty diabolical. The march started shortly after Christmas 1944, and we had very little warning, and it appears that all the prisoner of war camps near the Russian front were to be evacuated and moved westwards so that we would be nearer the Allies and the Germans would have a bargaining power with the Western Allies. On that epic, well, gruelling night, we lost between 80 and 90 people. What happened to them, I just don't know. And then the hero of the march was Captain Collins, our Anglican padre, who was 6'6". He was getting on in years. He had enormous feet, and he was also an ex-Oxford rowing blue, and he was a super chap. And he marched further than anybody because he was up and down that column looking after us like an old mother hen. It's bringing it back to reality, really. It's an attempt to do that. It was quite cathartic, and at times I could only do about 2 hours at a time, and I spent almost 4 months doing the drawings. But I found at times it would take over and it became automatic almost. And now I've started doing those drawings. I just want to carry on to other aspects of camp life and try and build up a body of work, not so much photographic, but an impression of the people and the characters and the camp life generally.
I'd encouraged Ted to make this new body of drawings based on the march, and kind of seeing these events as really significant to his experience, I wanted to represent them in some way as well. And as always before, I've been concerned with using materials that have a kind of resonance with the subject, and using materials that may have been to hand at the time and kind of form a physical link between the past and the present. And I think in producing this representation of Ted's boots, they're very evocative of endurance and the experience that he went through. In terms of this exhibition, I think it emphasises a difference between this kind of contained space with its textures, its warm light, and I think it tries to emphasise the fear as well as the freedom of leaving this kind of protection of the camp. I think as I move forward and I work in other locations and with other organisations and hopefully museums and things like that, the work will be a reaction to the kind of artefacts and stories that I encounter, and I'd like to go into those projects without any preconceptions about what it is I might make.